Welcome back, Holligans. We are joined once again by myself, Joe, and my co-host Ryan, here to talk about yet another movie. This one we're going a little bit older, not super old, but from mid-ish 90s. We're going with Forrest Gump, a absolute classic. Now, funny story about Forrest Gump. I was supposed to go see this movie. My brother was supposed to take me to see this movie. I was in high school, probably about a sophomore. Instead of taking me to see Forrest Gump, instead, at the time in theaters, he chose to take me to see Woody Harrelson in Natural Born Killers. Similar movies, mind you, but no, not even close to similar movies. It was, obviously, yes, I wanted to go do that at the time, but then having watched that movie, so much of it dealt with crazy, psychedelic, just craziness. It was an insane movie, and so I was just bored. Like, I don't understand what's going on. This is, I don't get it. Why are they doing this? And on the way home, my brother's driving us home, and he's like, "Now remember, don't say anything to mom." And I looked at him like, "What are you crazy? Of course I'm not gonna. What are you, dumb?" Like, he has to say something to me to not say something. The very moment we walked in the house, my mom was like, "Oh, how was the movie?" He was like, "Oh yeah, we didn't see that. I took him to see this." So I got to go away. I didn't have to be there for any of that. He got chewed out on his own for that. But then I finally did see Forrest Gump, and I went back to him and said, "You suck, because this Forrest Gump was so much better of a movie than that piece of garbage you took me to." Now, both Ryan and I had seen this before. Nothing new. Classic Tom Hanks cinema right here. Back at, I would say, the real height of Tom Hanks. He was in a streak. I think this was the middle of the streak of him winning consecutive Academy Awards for Best Actor. He got Philadelphia. He got Forrest Gump. I think he got something after this. And so his height. Now, he's still obviously one of the top names in Hollywood. Most of his movies are pretty good. It's Tom Hanks.
Yeah, the last one I saw was that Apple TV movie, Greyhound, I think. World War II movie where he's a ship captain. Yeah, actually, everything he's in is pretty much gold.
It just about is. I don't think I've seen a Tom Hanks movie in a while. Like, I know a bunch came out when the one where he was the ship captain, but the ships got hijacked by pirates. That was one that I didn't see. The one where he's in an airport and he's some foreign guy trying to live in the airport. That was one that looked kind of quirky and funny. Didn't see it. But I feel like any of those at any point I could sit down and watch. But we just happened to be, my family and I went on vacation. We were planning on taking the kids to a bubblegum shrimp company to eat. So we're like, well, we're going to watch this movie first. George, who is my youngest, he was just bored to tears. He absolutely couldn't have cared less about this movie. Now, my daughters, who were a little bit older, I thought at least maybe they'd be able to get something out of it, because I wasn't far off of their age, a little bit older, but wasn't far off their age when I watched it, and it really had an impact on me. It was great. I don't think either one of them, towards the end, when and spoilers might abound, but if you haven't seen this movie,
for a 1994 movie,
I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry, but at the end, when he's standing at his woman's grave and got his son there, who I didn't realize his little son, played by a very, very young. I just lost it. I can see his face.
Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
How did you not know that?
I just had forgotten it was him. Who now
Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah, that's it. But I don't know. I expected she was trying not to laugh at that very last part. I'm like, okay, fine. She doesn't really get the significance. So be it. I stole 2.5 hours of their vacation to sit and watch this movie. But I always really enjoyed it. I wanted to watch it with more of a critical eye this time than I had before, considering us doing this. And for the most part, this movie, I think, really holds up.
It does, yeah. I was noticing that a lot of the effects hold up too, visually from that perspective. I was remembering seeing it a long time ago. Yeah, I realized I don't own it except on VHS.
Ah, nice. That's the big 2-pack on the VHS, though, right? I've seen that. It's the big, thick, wide 2-pack one.
And yeah, it because it's what, a 2.5 hour movie, something like that.
Yeah.
It holds up well. Like, the effects are mostly practical, so they're pretty good. The only thing that didn't hold up for me was the mouth movements and the voices, where he's like inserted into these historical moments where he's talking to like presidents and stuff like that. Like, the mouth movement looks totally unrealistic and doesn't quite match with the sound. It's like, oh, that doesn't hold up, but the rest of it does. There are certain scenes where he's like in the background of stuff and he's been digitally inserted and it looks completely realistic. But other than that, I mean, the stuff in the war looks pretty real. A lot better. I mean, just as good or better than a lot of the stuff we're getting now from action movies and things like that. And,
this was a Robert Zemeckis film, and it was well done. He did a really good job with this. Some of the stuff they chose to do with the historical, throwing him into these historical scenes, was just ultra unique. You'd never seen anything like that. It was a really clever idea. The way that it was done in the movie, it was fairly well done, minus that little bit you talked about. You kind of look at it, it's not quite. But back then, you're not noticing any of that. You're just watching him inserted into these old, reels of people who have been videoed meeting presidents for certain events, college football teams, or because he got the Medal of Honor, different things that have happened throughout his life. And it was just really, I mean, it was amazing back then, but it was interesting to watch it again and just, kind of being in awe of how well done it was then.
From a story perspective, it's a little stranger now that we have so many movies that kind of retroactively go back and do things with history, try to explain where things came from and things like that. That's kind of what I was thinking about. It's like this, I remember it being like really, like you said, unique and very interesting that they're inserting him into these positions. And I can only assume that the intent was to show that even somebody so simple can have a profound effect on history. Just being a genuine and sincere and honest person can cause you to go to the White House again and meet the president again. But yeah, it's a little stranger in today's sort of climate where, every movie it seems like Disney puts out wants to go back and explain why something happened or how it happened or how, Cruella wasn't really a villain. She was misunderstood and things like that. It was just just slightly different in that perspective. There were a couple of these things that were, they were still fine, but it's like, just probably wouldn't have made it if it was made today. Or like the moment where he's sitting on the bench talking to the nurse, or she's at least dressed like a nurse who sits next to him.
Yeah, I'd say that, sure.
And she's an African-American lady, and he's telling her how he's named after his relative who started the Ku Klux Klan. Or Ku Klux, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to say it. The KKK, whatever. And it like shows he's like, they ran around in bed sheets and pretended to be ghosts. They even put bed sheets on their horses.
Oh my God. I had completely forgotten about that particular part of the movie. Like, it didn't have the impact that it had on me watching it again. Didn't have that exact same impact on me when I was younger. But, you watch that now and you're like, whoa, that's okay. But just the small things that they put in this movie are super well done. Now, I don't want this to be we're not just going to sit here and gush over Forrest Gump. There were some things in it that some of the things I thought were interesting as I watched it this time. This is a movie that you're following Forrest Gump throughout his life, and you're following a lot of major historical things that happened during the time between, when you meet him as a character and the end of the movie. Going through the civil rights movement, a lot of things going on in American history at the time you're dealing with this character, and going through different decades. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, or the 60s, 70s, and 80s, however they're portrayed. I think it was 60s, 70s, and 80s, how they portrayed that. I thought it was unique how it was different between him and then the female lead of the movie.
Jenny, yeah.
Jenny, his love. And first of all, I mean, oh God, she friend-zoned him so hard throughout the whole. It was almost hard to watching it again.
Yeah, it was one of the that was one of the things that struck me too. That would be difficult to make in an era where everybody's worried about everything and offended by everything. I mean, that's just the way it is. There's no way to get around that. This movie, he clearly loves her. He wants some kind of relationship with her. But there was that scene where he comes to find her at college. She's like making out with some dude in her car, and he hears her say, that hurt. And so he runs over and just starts punching like a machine.
Yeah.
Starts punching this guy. The guy's like, who is that? What's going on? And just takes off. And then she takes him to her room. And she's like, hey, you ever been with a girl before? And takes off her shirt. And she's got him naked because he was all wet.
Yeah, pouring rain outside. Sure.
And yeah, I'm glad you clarified why. Yeah. And she puts his hand on her and he's like, oh. And she's like, and then he gets kind of freaked out. She's like, I bet that never happened in your home ec class. And he's like, no, it did not. And he's like, I think I ruined your roommate's bathrobe. And it cuts like the camera shifts down and you see that the angle is from behind the roommate's bed where she is laying there awake, eyes wide open, like, what is going on? Like, that whole scene.
Yeah.
Is so strange in a modern light. She brings this developmentally disadvantaged, challenged, whatever
I like
you
that.
want to call them.
Developmentally disadvantaged. Okay, that's interesting.
I'm trying to find the most sensitive words to use because
oh my god,
typically it's medical terms start off not having any connotation and then they develop a connotation, so you have to constantly try to keep ahead of the sentiment. Anyway, whatever you want to call them. Anyway,
it's just 5 measly points.
Oh my god, yeah, that whole scene where the principal comes back to the house. She's like, is there a Mrs. Gump or a Mr. Gump since you're Mrs.
Gump?
Yeah. And the guy comes out and he's all like sweaty. He's like, your mama really cares about your education, and he just makes that noise at him.
Right?
I was like,
so good.
I did not catch this stuff the first time around. Like, I did not totally get what was going on because I was a little kid when I saw this for the first time.
Yeah, it's so good.
I remember the very first time, probably in 94 or 95, my parents were watching it. And I think it got to the scene where Jenny was like, you ever been with a girl before? And started to take her shirt off, and my folks were like, out.
I mean, it's PG-13. I think it's not. They don't show anything. But so what I wanted to talk about was as it progresses through the movie, and you're seeing it really stylistically changes for each different decade. But Forrest Gump doesn't really change. He's almost the same throughout the whole thing. So on the scenes where it's just him in these different time frames, you can't really tell. But then when it goes to Jenny, it's a really stark shift in the decade. And you can tell what decade it is based on her actions, what she's doing, who she's around. And I thought that was interesting and unique, and that I didn't even come close to catching that when I first watched it. But that was a unique part of this movie, how watching him, like, even from when he's a little kid, he is who he is the whole time. Like you said, he's genuine, heartfelt, honest. That's just who he is as a person, because that's who Mama raised him to be. And Jenny's the one who, through a tragic upbringing, which just utterly terrible, had, kind of a sad and tragic life. I mean, she was living kind of doing what she wanted, and she, at certain points would have said that she's just having a great time. But, you look back on a life like that, and that's a rough life to live.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that I didn't quite catch, being a kid and watching it. That, a lot of what she's doing is because she grew up without any kind of functional family or any kind of way of getting affection in a healthy way or attention in a healthy way.
Yeah.
There's always, Forrest is working towards things and going towards things, trying to keep promises and do what's right. And she is running off with hippies all the time. Like, that's her movie, running off with hippies.
I mean,
like, she's sitting there on a street corner on a curb or whatever, and some guy just pulls up in a bug he's like, I'm going to San Francisco, man. And she's like, all right, I'll come. And he's like, far out. And then
Yep.
now she's living in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Even when she just leaves him after they finally get together, like the next day, there's a cab outside. Like it's like a horror story for him, Forrest. It's really sad. I mean, it's really sad what she went through, and it's really sad what she puts him through.
Yeah.
And I hadn't quite caught on to how bad it was. I knew it was one of these things where, he always loved her, but I didn't quite remember the impact of how much he cared. I remember he named the boat after her and stuff like that. But it's really tragic, the whole thing.
Yeah, that famous line from the movie that, I understood it when I was a kid, but his line of, I may not be a smart man, but I know what love is. And that was like the one thing that he did in the movie, and he like turns around and walks out the door of almost him being a man and standing up for himself and like, I'm sick of your shit.
Yeah.
It's like, I may not know, but I know what this is. But otherwise, just watching, it's a bit of I'd say a white knight syndrome. You're watching a girl get with all these super jerk guys who are going to treat her like crap, and he just wants to be good to her. But I mean, as it is in life, sometimes girls don't want the good guy; they want the bad boy. And this movie's all about that. As far as her perspective is concerned, and so that was one of those harder things to watch this time. It's just how far that went for him, and it was really her taking advantage of him based on the level of intellect there. Had he been quote unquote more normal, maybe she'd have been with him. But my guess is even then, because he was just a good guy, she wouldn't have, because that's not who she went for. She didn't go for that kind of guy, regardless of his level of mental capacity.
Yep. Yeah, which is another thing. It's like, how does consent work when you're like that? How does any of this stuff really work? Does he, is it okay what she's doing, and is it okay what he's doing? Like, it just, there are a lot of issues today looking back at this. Even though there's stuff Forrest clearly wanted, there's, his ability to understand the impact of what he wants, which, yeah, again, I think the moral of the movie is you don't have to be extremely smart to understand what's important in life and get what you want, go after what you want, and have an impact.
I'd agree with that. I think that's a very good moral to take away from this movie.
Yeah.
The smallest, of creatures can make a profound impact, surprisingly so, on all the lives around them, to touch all these different lives, to him meeting Elvis. And little trivia behind that, the voice of Elvis was done by Kurt Russell.
I thought so. It sounded like him, but I forgot to look at the credits.
Do you know why it sounded like him? Do you know why we associated that?
Why?
3,000 Miles to Graceland.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're right.
That's why you would have associated his voice with a
young Elvis.
Elvis Presley voice. Which that wasn't that. That was terrible. Oh God. That's so bad.
The moment that I liked best in the whole movie, there's a lot. It's a big movie. Mm-hmm. But the moment I liked best was where he's in New York with Lieutenant Dan. Is that where they're supposed to be?
Yeah, Times Square.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
That.
Yeah, because they go to that bar, they pick up the hookers, they go back to Lieutenant Dan's apartment, and they've got these girls, and the one girl's like, Lieutenant Dan's a jerk to Forrest most of the time.
Yep.
And then the one girl's like, what are you, stupid or something? And Dan's just like, don't you ever call him stupid. Really defends him. Because Forrest saved his life. Like, they have a bond. Even if he is a little bit abusive to him, like, they have this bond that I guess wasn't apparent to me, or the depth of it and what was behind it didn't make itself obvious to me when I was much younger and watching this. And it really stuck out to me this time. It's like, oh, that's kind of, it's as impactful to me as the, I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is scene. Yeah.
Gary Sinise in this role of Lieutenant Dan, he really crushed it.
Definitely.
I mean, him even before he's the Lieutenant Dan that from the movie. He gets injured. Forrest Gump saves him, has to live his life, minus his legs. Just from the beginning, when he first meets these boys, when they first go in country, he was great. I loved his character and how there's been one of my forefathers has died in every single major U.S. conflict, and it goes through the Civil War, World War I, World War II. It was the things that they put in this movie, the choices that he made, just really fleshed out some of these characters, like Forrest and his best friend Bubba, who the role was turned down by Ice Cube. He turned it down. Dave Chappelle, he turned it down because Dave Chappelle didn't think that the movie was going to do well. He thought it was going to bomb. He ended up playing a best friend of Tom Hanks in a different movie. I think We've Got Mail is maybe what it said, but some other like romantic comedy movie that he did a while later. But I don't know if I don't think either of those two guys would have really, it wouldn't have been the same Bubba. Like, I really like the actor who played him, but he hasn't really gone on to do a whole lot else that we've seen. We saw him in Lucky Number 11. He was one of the guys who we really liked.
Yeah, that's what I'm just looking at is I remember watching it and being like, he makes the exact same face as Slow. Is it Slow? And it totally is.
Oh, 100%. As soon as I saw him in Slevin, I'm like, oh, it's Bubba.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
I wasn't sure if it was the same dude or just the same expression. But then I realized, like, when that came out, it was only about 10 years apart. So it makes sense that the guy basically looks the same. Like, he doesn't look really any older. He just looks a little bigger, maybe.
Yeah. But the relationships that, Forrest forms with people in the movie, the friends that he makes. But yeah, the one with Lieutenant Dan, that Lieutenant Dan never really like apologizes to him for how he ever acted, but he shows up. He's like, if you're ever a shrimp boat captain, I'll be your first mate. Thinking, like, was this guy going to run off and do that? No, absolutely, he's going to run off and do that. And the way the story plays out, and there's the big storm and everything that goes on, and they're the only shrimp boat left because they're out in it fighting the storm, and it's, me against God, and it's just a whole thing. It was really interesting how all of it was put together and how well it was done, and just watching it again, reminding myself how good of a movie this is.
Yeah.
Although another really good movie that we watched and reviewed and we said would probably be in the list of top 100 movies you need to watch before you die. I've been going back and forth on whether or not I put this in that category. Because we said that about Good Morning Vietnam.
Mm.
Would you put Forrest Gump in that category?
As my experience stands now, yes. That is not to say that as my movie knowledge expands, I wouldn't, it wouldn't get bumped eventually. But I would say for now, it has so much going for it. It would be difficult to argue for it not being on that list.
I would have a hard time, I think, making that argument too. But for some reason, I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm putting it there. I don't know if I would say that this is what you just have to see it, but it is so good. Now, I will say the part of the story towards the, 3/4-ish of the way, at least 2/3 way through the movie, him running, the whole running bit, just running across the country and back again. A couple of unique things, like the bumper sticker with the guy that he came up with a famous, bumper sticker that says "shit happens," or the guy with the smiley face that everybody knows, the yellow and the black smiley face. I mean, interesting and, I guess kind of quirky and fun to put in there. I'm watching it this time and thought, man, this is a really long movie. I feel like you could have cut all of that out and it would have been fine. Like, I was trying to really understand the significance of it, and maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, that scene, I think, is him dealing with the emotional fallout of Jenny leaving him, because they get together that night. She leaves before he even wakes up, leaves a note for him. And he's like, well, so I just felt like running. So I ran to the edge of town, or ran to the end of the driveway, ran to the edge of town, ran to the edge of the county, ran across the state, ran across the country. And yeah, it leaves you with a lot of questions. I mean, you don't have to show everything, but it's like, it's just so strange. It
Maybe.
was a really strange scene. It was like we were so close to the end, and I was like, okay, but there's that scene, right? There's a point in the movie where he just runs for like years, and then it happened, and it was like it almost felt like the movie got detoured.
Yeah. No, that is what it felt like. Now, you're right. And I mean, I understood that watching it, that this is him dealing with what the love of his life, really. It's Forrest Gump is somewhat of a love story, but it's such a heartbreaking love story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to look at it that way and see it in the aspect of love story, it's just utterly tragic. But to deal with that, he finally gets to be with this woman in a way that he's probably never even understood. Didn't even know something like this was possible. And so he's with her in this way. And then she takes off. And how that can change a person. And maybe it's just because with movies nowadays, I'm so used to them like holding the hands of the audience and, having somebody expunge information that doesn't necessarily need to be said out loud for, a fairly competent movie viewer to understand what's going on. So I get the running thing. It's just him trying to deal with that. But I guess it was the absence of any sort of inner monologue that I think would come with movies nowadays where, and Jenny left me and then I went running. And so I just thought, and he talked, I thought about Jenny. He even said it at one point in the movie, but they didn't dwell on it. So I don't know. It was just so much of that. Like, I understand throwing it in there. It's like, this is like, he didn't know what else to do. So it just went back to it's almost a circle back to the very first beginnings of the movie when he breaks out of his leg braces and has to run away from the bullies. And that if I was going anywhere, I was running. Yeah. But it was an interesting way to circle back around to that. I just thought it was a little drawn out, trying to maybe shove in a couple too many references to things that, because of Forrest Gump, all these other things happen in the world. It felt like a little bit much.
Yeah, that was my takeaway too. There was a little too much of like of shoehorning him into situations and having him be the inspiration for things. It was, I mean, having him be part of these historic events. Like, I love that drill sergeant when he's in the army and he like, yes. Like the guy is like, what are you here to do? He's like, whatever you tell me to, drill sergeant. He's like, God damn, you are a genius. You must have an IQ of 160 or whatever. And then he puts the
best goddamn answer I've ever heard in my life.
He puts the gun together. Why did you assemble that rifle so quickly? He's like, because you told me to. He's like, God damn, you're going to be a general someday. Like, that was fantastic because, I mean, it just, they just want you to do what they tell you to do. Yep. And it
absolutely
follows that he would fit in pretty well there. He's just like, all right, I mean, it's pretty easy. You just do what they tell you to do.
It is. Now, speaking of his military thing, there's a scene in the movie.
Not saying that being in the military is easy, saying the movie says, like, basically that, like, Forrest just does what you tell him to do and exactly what you tell him to do. It's kind of been the joke the whole time that he takes things too literally.
Yep.
Like, they're like, run. And he runs out of the football stadium. Like, all the way out. So they have to
knocks the band over.
Yeah. So it's like when they tell him, like, you have to do exactly what we tell you to do, nothing more, nothing less. He fits in perfectly.
Yes. So, speaking of the military, there's a scene when he gets back from Vietnam and he's at the Washington Monument. There's a big protest rally going on, a lot of hippies, and they call him up to speak. And he goes up to the microphone and he starts to speak, and some actual army guy, general, or not, probably some commander, he rips out all the plugs so that the mics all go off and they can't hear him. And he's sitting there talking into the microphone. He's saying something. Well, come to find out what he says, according to Tom Hanks, when they asked him the question about it, he goes, sometimes when people go to Vietnam, they don't go home to their mamas without any, or they go home to their mamas without any legs. Sometimes they don't go home at all. That's a bad thing. That's all I have to say about that. So that was apparently, and I never knew it. I knew he was talking. You could see him speaking, so he's obviously saying something. That's what he was saying then. And that sounds like a very
Forrest Gump thing to say.
It does. That's like a direct. These are the things that I've seen, I've experienced, been around as this has happened. This is just how I feel about it.
Yeah, just that was another little thing that occurred to me is like there's so much stuff now where I think the writers want to make themselves seem smart or make the characters seem smart, but without putting in the effort to write something smart for them. So they have it cut away, or there's some reason why you can't hear it, and you see the impact it's having on everybody. Like when if you're in one scene and you flash sideways to something going on at the same time, and somebody just told this joke, and all you hear is the punchline. One of the earliest movies is like Men in Black, where Kay is telling Jay this joke, and he's like, "But mommy, this one's eating my popcorn," and he's laughing, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta go." Like goes back to being serious.
Yes,
it's kind of one of these things that I've noticed is becoming more prevalent. Like having something really deep that's supposed to happen, but you don't actually write something for it, so the audience has to imagine something deep and impactful for it. Like this was one of the first movies I can remember that did that, but now it's kind of overdone. Kind of like if you watch, oh my God, what is it? Something About Mary. Is that the movie?
Maybe. I know it is a movie.
Yeah, some of these movies were like, they were like the first ones to come out with some of these outlandish comedy sketch type scenarios. And they were really edgy in their time. They were innovative, and now everybody does the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think some of the gripes that we might have just come from the fact that it was really successful like 27 years ago, and a lot of stuff has copied it now.
And that's natural.
Yeah.
It's natural for that sort of thing to come into being. I mean, when something is done right, you try to mimic what worked so that you can also succeed. That's, you're trying to open a business. So you're talking to people who have done it before. What did you do that worked? Like, what can I do that works? But I mean, you have to put your own spin on it. You have to do which I think is what you're doing. I can't wait till it happens. But trying to figure out what are things I need to watch out for? What are pitfalls? What are good things that I could be doing that maybe I haven't thought of? That's what the media, I guess you could say, whether it's YouTube, Hollywood, TV, whatever, that's what they do. Somebody comes out with a YouTube thing, like the challenges. Oh, whatever the challenge is. And everybody wants to do challenges. The hot sauce challenge, the ice bucket challenge, all these Tide Pod challenge, whatever it is.
Even our podcast and our YouTube channel are not, they're kind of what you're talking about. We're doing what other people are doing, which is movie reviews and discussions, but we're not just doing the new thing. We're going back, we did Hawk and Rev, a really indie film. Like nobody I've talked to, I've recommended it to several people that I've talked to. Like, have you ever heard of this? Like, it's really good. You should watch it.
It's crying shame if you haven't seen it. Please go see it.
Oh, it's so good.
It's fantastic.
But it's like, yeah, we want to bring that kind of stuff up, or movies that we've, that you might have missed, or you might even be too young for. Like 3,000 Miles to Graceland. A lot of people probably haven't, or either haven't seen it or have forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I always liked about, maybe finding like old CDs or something like that, like cleaning out your car. It's like, oh, I forgot this mix CD or tape that I made or whatever. It's like, let's see what I was into 5 years ago when I made that. Right.
Yeah. It's, as you grow, tastes change. It's interesting to see, oh, what was I into then? What was happening back then? Mm-hmm. What was everybody into at that time? Oh, ice baby. Da, 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 da. And then, certain things go away, and thankfully so, and they're not in the spotlight anymore, as well they shouldn't be. But certain things, like this movie, that does things that nobody else did at the time, that you had never seen before. And yeah, you're going to see people who are still doing those kind of things now. Why? Because they worked. Because they were done so well that they're still impactful today if done correctly. A lot of places don't. A lot of studios, directors, whatever, they're not doing them correctly. They're just trying to cash in on something that somebody else already did. But it's like that line from Forrest Park, oh my God, from Jurassic Park. Sorry, I live in St. Louis. That's Forrest Park's a big thing.
At least you gave some justification as to why you just did that.
I had to. Oh my God, it was terrible. So that famous line from Jurassic Park, they were so busy, trying to see if they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yeah.
because they know it's going to work, and it'll bring them some sort of money or some sort of 5 minutes of fame that they can have, and everybody's trying to grab a part of. But it's nice to go back and see these things that really pioneered it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was glad that I suggested us to do this movie, as it was fun to go back and watch it again. I had not seen it in quite the number of years.
Yeah.
And it was fun to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I was glad to watch it again. So if we're wrapping up, I would say that I recommend watching it. I don't know that I'd recommend renting it if you don't already have it. There's probably ways to go about it. It was one of those things where it was interesting to me that it wasn't available anywhere in any of my streaming services for free, because it's 27 years old. But, it is what it is. You can probably find it at your local library. It's a movie you probably should see. It's not super fun, but very good. Good morals.
It is. And I don't know. I wouldn't say it's not super. I mean, sure, it's not a super over-the-top action, that kind of movie. But it is fun. It's also, it's a drama. So it has some very serious things. It deals with some very serious issues. And interestingly, in the way that it deals with them. So I agree with you. I think it's definitely a watch. I'd say that I think it's worth a rent. If you can, I had to rent it to watch it because I forgot I have it. I have it on DVD, which is an old form of media that
Fancy.
us boomers like to use.
Fancy. Well, you trump my VHS copy.
Do I? I don't know if I do.
I mean, kind of. I think
your VHS copy trumps my copy.
VHS had better sound than DVD for sure.
Kind of like LPs.
Kind of.
Okay, I get that. But I say it's a watch. I mean, I think it's worth a rent if you haven't seen it. It's just a really good movie. Now, I will, having watched it, and I will put this question to you. I know we're kind of wrapping up here, but I did think about this, and I'd forgotten that this thought crossed my mind. I'm really glad I remembered it. As I said in the very beginning of this podcast, that this was at the height of Tom Hanks, that he had just won an Academy Award, and then he does this role. He wins an Academy Award for this and goes on to the next one to win another one. Does he deserve an Academy Award for Forrest Gump? Like, after having watched this, I know he played it well, but is just acting just a little bit slow. I mean, he's not trying to play an I Am Sam, or he wasn't like the Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man sort of. He's not at that level of trying to be a disabled. Can I say the line from Tropic Thunder? Go
ahead, do it.
You never go full retard. But and I thought about that in this movie. Was he really? And I have no idea. I do not remember. I didn't look it up. I don't know who he was up against for Best Actor of that year. What else was out there? I just don't know if. Well, okay, I know Woody Harrelson was in Natural Born Killers that same year, so I can say that he didn't deserve it for that. But I at least know that movie came out that year. But I really questioned whether or not he deserved the nod. I think he got it because of the movie, how good the movie was versus necessarily just him. But I don't know.
Since you bring it up that way, I'm not sure. Just because it was so different. Because you bring up Rain Man. Right. Rain Man was in the care of somebody else. Like, this is a story that follows somebody like that who's completely independent and kind of going through life on their own. A little bit of an interesting mix of kind of going where life takes you. He just kind of goes with stuff. He he gets out of college. Somebody shows up like, hey, you ever thought about joining the army? So he goes in the army, goes to school because of football and stuff like that. But I think that's story-wise kind of a big difference, that they portrayed somebody like that with a lot of dignity, somebody with that sort of, developmental delay or whatever it is that he's supposed to have in that. It's never made quite clear. It's just he's a little bit below like what he should be.
It's just 5 measly points.
Yeah, I don't know. I think his performance was really good. So I would say, depending on what else he was up against that year, probably.
And maybe. And one person we didn't talk about in this movie was Sally Field, who played his mom.
Yeah.
I thought she did a good job.
Yeah.
She's not in it a whole lot. The movie's not about his mom, but she did a good job as his mom, as the trying to be the caretaker of him as a single parent because his father was on vacation, which I'm really glad. That was another thing I thought about. I'm really glad that in most movies, when she said the line, told Forrest, well, vacation is when you go somewhere far, far away and don't ever come back. That they didn't bring that up when he was an adult. Like somebody said, oh, we're going to go on vacation. And he like freaks out about it because he thinks vacation is such this big bad thing. Like that's what I feel like they would do in a movie now.
Yeah, probably.
And they didn't do it. And I appreciated they didn't do it.
And there is a lot of stuff that they bring full circle. So it's not like a lack of foresight. You know, even the doctor who's with his mom at the end is the one who helped him with his braces in the beginning. Like walks past Forrest as a grown man, supposed to be around late 30s, early 40s, and looks up at him and is like, boy, we really straightened you out. That's when I realized like that's the same doctor.
Because it's the same small town.
Yeah.
And that he's just been the doctor there forever, which I thought that was interesting in the beginning. I totally hadn't thought about it, I guess, since I watched it. But he's in this doctor's office and the doctor's smoking a cigarette while he's getting him fit up for these leg braces. And just the way things used to be versus the way things are now. Oh, man. Yeah. This movie, historically, I think maybe it was one of the reasons my kids just didn't care at all. But being able to look back and see how things were, how life was different in these different eras, I think that's another interesting thing about this movie. It's kind of like its own period piece.
A little bit, yeah.
But I think we've both kind of said everything we wanted to say about it. It's a watch from both Ryan and myself.
Yep.
Howligans, I want to say thanks once again for listening, tuning in to us, hearing us, just talk about another movie. And I think there might be different ways if you so chose, if you were so inclined to get a hold of us.
There might be. I've heard rumors. They can email us at moviehowl@gmail.com. There's a chance that there's a Twitter account at moviehowl. And they should definitely follow that if they want to hear what's coming up. If they want to get a hold of us, tell us what they do like, tell us what they don't like, tell us that they think you're a big old dum-dum for saying Forest Park.
Thank you for that. Somebody please just tweet me and say that, just because.
Just tweet him, stupid is as stupid does.
There you go.
Right. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Joe.
And that's all we've got to say about that.
That's a good way to end that. That's good.